Good evening and welcome to the 28th episode of the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. I suppose the first thing we have to do is dissect the disappointment, Noel, of the other night where UCD came to town and took away a 3-0 first leg lead against Treaty Utd in front of a huge crowd at the Markets Field. Speaking maybe a day and a half after the game, is it a case of UCD came, were very professional and were too good for Treaty, or was there a case of Treaty didn't perform on the night, or maybe a bit of both?
Yeah, possibly a bit of both, and then just picking up on a few articles the following day, words like an emphatic victory for UCD, which, it was. There's no getting away from it. Look, their first goal was probably a bit fortuitous, disappointing, for Ty Ryan. He's had such a good year, and it was, but look, overall, I thought they were very polished UCD. They certainly had their homework done. I'd be very familiar with them over the years, and what really surprised me was their kind of tenacity. Early in the game, putting their bodies on the line, just blocking shots around the edge of the box. They dominated in the air in all the aerial battles. Puts Treaty under terrible pressure in terms of corners and didn't give them a sniff in terms of defending, free kicks and corners. I thought the selection of Treaty maybe played into UCD's hand too much, and by that, and look, we were watching ourselves. UCD could afford to play a high line, and they weren't shy in getting to that high line, and they were racing to the halfway line when they cleared the ball, because they obviously felt nice and secure that there was no one in the Treaty lineup, who could hurt them, kind of running in behind, or there was no player in that selection that could play a pass that would actually set someone free, going in behind. And, from that point of view, we're talking about the likes of Dean George and Sean McSweeney in particular, who I just felt that it was the home leg, and Jason brought it up, how important it was. You had a crowd of 3,000. There'd probably be less than 10% of that group, who go to the bowl on Sunday night, and it was important to keep the tie alive. And obviously, look, they're still in there with a chance, but it certainly would have been a better chance at 1-0 or possibly 2-0, and it took until the 81st minute for him to create a real opening when Sean McSweeney put Dean George through, but unfortunately he didn't hit the target. But look, it was a bad night for him. I'm sure there was a lot of soul searching after in the dressing room. They talk about a lack of experience with Treaty, but when you go through the team, there's plenty of experience, plenty of League of Ireland experience in it. Ty Ryan, Waterford and Cork, and Mark Ludden in Galway for years. Jack Lynch is the only player on the pitch that actually has a First Division League winners medal with Waterford a few years ago. And while the team was hastily arranged, there's no doubt that there is a lot of experience, and you'd have to say more experience on the pitch than UCD have at this stage. But it wasn't very evident, and I'm sure there was a lot of soul searching in the dressing room after, and they'll feel very disappointed that they didn't really lay a glove on UCD, which was something that that we were hoping they would do. Whatever about winning the game, you kind of die with your boots on, particularly in front of a crowd like that. And sadly, it didn't happen, and it certainly is an opportunity missed.
Yeah, I know that Treaty have been defensive, Jason, in the way they go about their business and have been all season. And look, we have advocated it was probably the right thing to do, considering the competitive nature of the division. They have picked up points. Do you agree with Noel, I suppose, in that obviously Sean McSweeney was on the substitutes bench, who is your most creative player? Now, to be honest, when he came on, it didn't seem like he was it seemed like he was very fresh, and we didn't quite know what was wrong with him, that maybe he couldn't start the game. I'm always a person who promotes that even if a player is carrying knock, you maybe should start first rather than coming off the bench. But do you agree with Noel that maybe the starting lineup played into UCD's hands and maybe was a slight bit defensive at home against UCD?
I do, Adrian, definitely. It's okay being defensive, but we said it last week, you've got to have a transition to attack if you're being defensive, and there was none. There's no point saying any different. There was none. There was balls going forward, and they were just coming straight back because of the setup of the midfield three, in my opinion. Jack Lynch is a lot more effective in the 8th position, coming from deep, and especially when he knows he has Mark Walsh behind him and another player in front of him, normally Sean McSweeney. There was other options to play in the 10. that would have freed Jack up and allowed him to play the ball and get on the ball a little bit. And we saw small bits of that when Sean McSweeney came on. I've said it for a few weeks. You know, I'm not sure about Noel O'Connor at this level. We could see it again on the first leg. We could see it. What was his role? Was he a second six? If he was a second six, and I'm Callum McNamara, then I'm bitterly disappointed because, in my opinion, Callum has been very, very good, Adrian, all season when he came into the team. So if you're playing that 4-2-3-1. then it needs to be Callum in there because he uses the ball better, he moves the ball quicker, and he can actually join in a little bit in the play. I don't think Clyde came out of the Treaty half, really, only for set pieces, good in the air and a physical presence, but there's a lot more needed at this level. So the makeup of the midfield three, if I was to be critical at all, and I don't want to be, really, because the team has hugely overachieved all season, but look, as a Treaty supporter, I was disappointed the other night in how they went about it. You know, and Noel is quite right. They didn't lay a glove on UCD. You know, and okay, we can say they were in the game up until the 34th minute, I suppose. Tig's mistake. Again, we're not going to hammer him for that because he's been exceptional all season. But in the big games, you don't want to be making them mistakes. You know, obviously Dean George had a chance at 1-0, and that was the big one. You know, but that's the really only chance, Adrian, that Treaty fashioned, I suppose. Bit of huffing and puffing from set pieces, and Ludden got a couple of crosses into the box towards the end of the game. But Noel is on the money there when he says about people doing their homework, you know, and you look at UCD, you know, they targeted Ludden, especially in the first half. You know, they kicked balls down the top of him, Larkin Healy did. They had real pace out that side as well, with Liam Kerrigan down on top of him. And they got him booked early, you know, and he's one of Treaty's, I suppose, most attacking options, Adrian, even though he's a left back, you know, and you flip that over, I suppose, you know, and you're talking about the detail. And we saw a couple of chinks in UCD's armour when we were watching it, you know, Farrell at right back, not strong in the air, and that wasn't targeted. So I suppose they're the little pieces, Adrian, that you'll be looking at and a little bit disappointed in. But don't take anything away from UCD. They were exceptional on the night. Sam Todd and Harvey O'Brien in particular, the whole back four. Jack Heaney, you know, dominant, really, really dominant. And there seemed to be a gulf in class, Adrian, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it did seem to be the case on the night. And Noel, after the game, we briefly met a former League of Ireland referee who you'd be well acquainted with in Anthony Buttermore. And he made the comment that did the Treaty players, particularly in the last 10 minutes, realise that this was just the first half of the tie? Now, while I agree to a certain degree, you know, there was 2 goals more conceded. Tommy made the changes of bringing on the likes of Sean McSweeney, Dean George, and then the 2 wingers, Joel Castrain and Willie Armshaw. To be fair, we did mention the fact that the home tie was really important, though, for Treaty. So I don't think I can disagree with the fact that Tommy was obviously trying to put on attacking players in a bid to rescue at least a draw from it.
Yeah, and look, you can't fault him for that. And as I said, we're not here to have a go. We're just saying it as we see. And I would be thinking in the back of my mind, like, look, while 1-0 down, it isn't great and it's a poor performance. It's not a disaster. I said to someone, you get out of there with a 1-0 defeat and 10 minutes into the game in the Belfield Bowl, someone goes into the box and you win a penalty and someone gets sent off and all of a sudden you scored a penalty and it's 1-1 and, you know, you're facing UCD with 10 men. And it is very important. And maybe they were a little bit gung-ho and there might have been too many changes or too many attacking changes made. But I think that we have to go back to the fact that you'd certainly needed, you know, a Dean George or a Sean McSweeney to start the game at least, and just to keep that UCD defence a bit more honest, if you like, because they didn't really need it to be, and that's what really created the problem, because they were so high up the pitch that even when Treaty got the ball, and I saw it, that, you know, their midfield were hounded out of it with the pressure that they were being put under and forced into playing poor balls and a lot of straight balls. I think I counted 3 balls in the second half that went wide on the UCD keeper's left-hand side because there was just no options. And look, it is disappointing. 3-0 is, you know, certainly a tough ask, but I was thinking of UCD and after this is the UCD team that are going to be playing in the Colleges League in a couple of months' time and playing in the Collingwood Cup, and the likes of UCC and UL will be taking them on, and Maynooth, and they don't win it every year. So stranger things have happened. They're obviously going to have to not concede another goal for sure, and if they can just get a lead at all, because even with 10 minutes to go, if they were 1-0 up and got a second, well then you could see a right end. And I think what may happen is they will regret that last 5 or 6 minutes of the home leg and said, if we hadn't conceded the third, because they might find themselves 2-0 up in the game, and then that's when the regret will really hit home, that we should have managed those last 10 minutes a bit better. But again, I'm saying, and we're talking about Tommy, there was enough experience on the pitch. There's guys with a lot of minutes, maybe not for Treaty, but with other clubs in the League of Ireland, and they probably should have managed the situation a bit better themselves. But look, they'll realise that now, and they'll have to galvanise themselves now and certainly go to UCD and don't concede early and just try and get a lead. And if they can do that, well, anything can happen.
Yeah, hopefully they can finish the season, if that is to be the case, strongly. I like that slight bit of optimism, Noel, where, if they get a lead early, you'd never know. It could throw the cat among the pigeons. But, Jason, it was fair to say that, UCD are known, obviously, for their footballing style. But when we were watching the game, Noel already mentioned how comfortable in the defence they were. Sam Todd and Harvey O'Brien were absolutely dominant, not just in open play, though, Jason, but that UCD side took away the threat that we've known from Treaty all season, from crosses, from Mark Ludden's long throws. I mean, we didn't really get a sniff on the night, and that was telling.
It certainly was, Adrian, and I said it a couple of weeks ago when we were debating who you'd prefer, Galway or UCD, and this was my fear. I said it, that if UCD turned it on, they could hit you for 3 or 4, and they hit us for 3, and we look at Galway and Bray finishing scoreless, so that tie is obviously still alive. But what stuck out to me, Adrian, I suppose, to answer your question, they had their homework done. They were diligent in their approach. I've said it a couple of times. The last time they came to the Markets Field, it was 3 centre-backs, and Treaty exploited them in wide areas. That hasn't been the case since, on the 2 occasions that UCD have played Treaty. They changed their approach, a lot more solid in defence, higher up the pitch. They looked at Treaty's weaknesses. They looked at their strengths. As I said a moment ago, they targeted Ludden. They know Kieran Hanlon isn't blessed with a huge amount of pace. Either is Matt Keane, and they stopped any supply going to Stephen Christopher. I thought he was very ineffective throughout, and I had that fear as well. He wasn't in my starting 11, and I was very, very impressed with UCD. They were dogged in defence, Adrian. They didn't mind going long when they had to go long, and it worked for them in the second half. Derek Keane, obviously that great running cross on 80 minutes for Whelan for his first goal, and UCD's second. And then on 93 minutes, Whelan showing his class. An absolutely fantastic goal, and killed the tie. For me, it really did. And it's back to what I said last week, Adrian, about sending the supporters home happy and forget the result and forget the second leg and forget the final. I said we needed a performance, and that was kind of the disappointing thing. We didn't get going. We didn't threaten them. And in all honesty, they looked very comfortable, Adrian, for me.
Unfortunately, they did look comfortable on the evening. Noel, the second leg, team selection, I suppose, how do you approach it? I suppose there is no other way to approach it. I mean, if you're 3-0 down from the first leg, you might as well go all out for goals. So you'd imagine there'd be a couple of more attacking changes. Yeah,
well, not a huge amount. I think, and you're looking after the game and you're saying, well, who actually played well for Treaty or who stood out for Treaty, and you are scratching your head. And it's a little bit unfair, to say that, but it was the truth. And you'd like to think that these guys are saying, we certainly didn't do ourselves justice on the night. We didn't play up to the level we can. We didn't show any form. Guys that have been really strong, just didn't show. And you'd like to think that they want to rectify that now on Sunday, and show a bit more. And I keep on having to say, look, while UCD were great, it's still UCD we're talking about. We're not talking about Derry City or St. Pat's or Bowes or Shamrock Rovers, and they have been beaten in matches, and they've been well beaten in matches this year, and it's really the last throw of the dice for for them. And look, whatever about saying they've nothing to lose on Wednesday night, they certainly won't have the pressure of a big crowd in Dublin. And they need to start thinking. The first thing is can we win the match? I mean, even if they can win the match 1-0, obviously it won't get them to the final, but it'll certainly give them a small bit of self-respect, for want of a better word, back. And there is a lot of good players and a lot of experienced players in there, but and the selection is going to be important. There's no doubt about that. And there has to be a bit more balance in terms of defence and attack. And look, Treaty haven't gone gung-ho all season for the right reasons. I don't think they'll do it on Sunday, but certainly, if Sean McSweeney is an injury or doubt, whatever, then, you'll start him and you'll play away until, whatever happens. It isn't that you have to save him now for the next game. And if you do, it's going to be a good complaint because they'll be in the final. Dean George, I think, is a guy, look, he's a guy that got a hat-trick against Shelbourne less than 12 months ago. So he's certainly not a rookie, and he knows his way around the league. And he is going to have to balance the team a little bit better in terms of attacking threat. I agree with Jason as well. I don't really know what Colin McNamara has done, in the last few months, not to be playing in that game, which was the biggest game of the year. We said actually that the idea of three midfielders, it wasn't the worst idea in the world if it was to counteract the likes of Sean Brennan in there. But we did say that we thought that the personnel wasn't the right personnel in that three. So certainly you're looking at getting Dean George on the pitch if you can, getting Callum McNamara in and getting Sean McSweeney in. And I think, so far, bar Wednesday night, the defence has never let us down. We're hoping it's just a blip. And normally when a team is as poor defensively as that, they normally bounce back the following game with a real solid, strong defensive performance. So if we can think that can happen, and there's a bit more threat going forward, and I keep on saying it, if they can just get their noses in front, it is going to be all to play for. There's no doubt about that. And I just feel at the end they may well regret that, particularly the last goal that they conceded, which might come back to haunt them. But I would expect a really strong and good performance on Sunday. And, if you like, and I don't like to use the word, but a bit of revenge for the lack of the performance on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I hope you're right, Noel. Jason, Dean George, Callum McNamara and Sean McSweeney in, Noel says, are you in agreement with that?
I would be, definitely, Adrian. They were in my original lineup last week. So if they're available, they have to play. They really do. And Noel is quite right. The defence has, the defence has done very, very well all season. And I think that midfield three, as Noel said, the personnel in there on Wednesday night affected the back four, because you had people dropping in between centre backs to get the football and in areas that they shouldn't even be in, and I'm trying not to be overly critical, Adrian, but it's frustrating when you watch it, and especially when there's other options on the pitch that are on the bench that will give you more. So options on front of the back four for them to give the ball to is the bit to be addressed for me. Change that midfield three, get the structure of it right, get Callum in there with Jack and Mark Walsh. Dean George in a wide area or in the 10 or up front, and McSweeney in the 10 if Dean George is wide or up top in the 9. Kieran Hanlon needs support. He needs people close to him. Noel said it the other night, we were watching it, and the attributes of a number 10, get close to the striker, be an option for him, but as well get beyond the striker, for flick-ons and breaking balls that Kieran Hanlon challenges for. That's not in Jack Lynch's game. He's a lot more effective running from deep, from the 8th position. So if it's Dean George or McSweeney, you'll definitely see a positive swing in Treaty's favour. But I'm struggling to hide my disappointment, Adrian. I really am, because we're behind this group. We've been behind them all year. We really have, and we didn't expect them to win the playoffs. I certainly didn't. But I just expected a little bit more on Wednesday night, and it was disappointing.
Yeah, you certainly wear your heart in your sleeve. You can see the disappointment from both of you. But obviously we all are disappointed. And as you said, not so much because of the result as a whole. We weren't expecting to go too far more forward, but maybe the performance in front of such a big crowd, we were probably hoping for a bit more attacking intent. It brings me, Noel, to the second playoff, we'll say, between Galway and Bray, which ended 0-0 in the Carlisle grounds. I know we were discussing this at the Treaty game. Bray, we just said it already, Bray coming in with absolutely no form into this. They've now held Galway, even though it was the home leg for Bray. But you know the way football goes, they came in with no form. Galway were 14 points better off than them. I mean, it wouldn't, although it might surprise people, I have to say myself, it wouldn't surprise me to see Bray go there and snatch a win on Sunday.
No, you couldn't rule it out, absolutely. And there's a place that'll be rocking on Sunday evening. There'll be a massive crowd from Galway. In fairness, they have really got behind the team. And but then there's enormous pressure as well on them. And, you know, they'll be cognizant of that as well, of not conceding, and it could be another kind of a long night. You could see that game go to extra time and penalties. You know, the way it's set up, because while the likes of Brandon Kavanagh was supposed to play very well, still, you know, Galway won't take any chances, and they won't leave any gaps, and it could be a long night in Galway on Sunday night, I'd say.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It could go all the way. Jason, we all know that the League of Ireland, the most interesting parts of the League of Ireland are almost in the off season with the transfer window. There's so much, you know, transfers between clubs and obviously players leaving because of the contract situations, only 12 months signing, and we know all of that. We also know that Michael Duffy and Patrick McElhenney are already going to Derry City, who expect to be strong next year. But I suppose some news on the first division. We used the term Cork City flexing their muscles early on. They've signed 2 players for next season already. Aaron Bulger, who was on loan with the club, has signed. He was on loan before with the club, has signed. And also Ali Gilchrist, centre-back from Shelbourne, who was just in their title-winning team and a relative ever-present, is now signing for Cork as well. We all obviously expect Cork to be strong, Jason. And then you have Michael O'Connor leaving Shelbourne as well. So it's already starting in the season. Well, I suppose isn't even over in both divisions.
No, it certainly is. You know, it's starting, Adrian, and it's good to see. It keeps us ticking over, I suppose. Those of us who live for the game and love the game, keeps the interest going, even when the game stopped, I suppose. Ali Gilchrist is a real statement of intent by Cork for me. Very, very impressed with him this season. Very comfortable in possession, excellent in the air, and very effective in both boxes. He'll certainly help Cork. There's no doubt about it. I think they'll be in the market for a goalkeeper as well. That'll be interesting. We'll keep an eye on that one. And you mentioned Bulger. He certainly impressed me this season. Very, very good technical player. And they've underachieved. We talked about Treaty. Cork have definitely underachieved, and they'll need to hit the ground running at the start of next season, Adrian. They'll need to be hitting wins straight from the off, and I don't think as much patience will be shown with the manager if they don't, you know, because they're making statements of intent, as I said, with these signings. Michael O'Connor is now available to clubs, and I know you have your doubts about him for different reasons, but we saw the goal he got in the Markets Field this year. He has that nasty edge to him as well that every good striker needs to have. A lot of people won't admit that, but it's very much part of the game, and he's impressed me when I've seen him, so he won't be a free agent for too long. You also mentioned Derry City, and a couple of lads may be going there, and I was chatting to Will Fitzgerald during the week. He's expecting to be offered a deal with Derry, but I also know that Sligo and Bohs are also keeping tabs on Will and are interested in taking him, so it's a busy time of year for everyone, Adrian, players and clubs, and it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, we'll certainly be keeping a keen eye on it. And as you said, Colin Healy might be a man under pressure if he doesn't pick up results fairly quick. He was already under pressure, but now making signings like that, they will be expected to challenge, no doubt about it. Noel, just turn our attention to the international scene for the moment. We know obviously next week we have a sellout at the Aviva Stadium, Ireland facing Portugal. We know that Ireland had a really good performance against Portugal in the last game, and it was of course Cristiano Ronaldo who's broken Villarreal, Atalanta hearts, Ireland hearts in the last few minutes in the last few weeks of games. That was a heartbreaking one considering, but got 2 wins against Azerbaijan and Qatar. I know they're not the highest ranked teams in the world, but would you say that obviously Stephen Kenny, we know he's named his squad and Seamus Coleman's back and Aaron Connolly isn't selected. There are 2 things we could talk about, but would you say that maybe a good performance against Portugal and a win against Luxembourg and we're still very much on the right track if that occurs?
Yeah, I think so. I think look, we have a long history of kind of overachieving against the bigger teams. Those games kind of seem to look after themselves. The Irish team always seem to get up for them. You know, you go back to Germany and Holland and Spain, and you know, we've had a lot of great victories in Dublin. And look, I mean, I think that squad, you know, they should be in really good form now. A lot of them will have a lot more games under their belt than they had. You know, they've won the last 2 games. They've scored, was it 7 goals? So, you know, they should be in great form, and it's a game I'm looking forward to. I think the Luxembourg one is possibly more important in terms of getting a win. I don't think anyone will be jumping up and down if Ireland don't beat Portugal. You know, as long as, you know, we spoke about performance a while ago, as long as they perform, you know, to a certain, you know, if they were beaten by an odd goal. But I think the Luxembourg game probably more important, and it's very important that we get a victory there. So hopefully, you know, a win and a draw would certainly be a great week for the Irish team next week.
Yeah, definitely would. And Jason, on a last note, we've already discussed a couple of FAI games during the earlier part of the week, TUI Cup game as well, and Fairview Rangers. But to turn our attention maybe just to one of the all-Premier games in the FAI Cup that occurs this week in the Limerick District League. Mungret Region will be hosting Ballinanty Rovers in this competition. Mungret and Balla actually met already once the season in the league. It was a very tight encounter. Balla came out with the 2-1 victory in that one. You know, we know now that Conor Ellis is back following a very prolonged absence for selection for Ballinanty as well. And considering the result against Fairview and a couple of results in the league for Balla, which cuts them adrift from the top 3, this will be a huge game for them. And I suppose on the other side as well, Mungret have not been in good form at all in the league, so a welcome distraction for them as well.
Yeah, Mungret is historically a very difficult place to go and get a result, Adrian. So that's interesting that they're at home. And you quite rightly said Balla got a win out there early in the season, but it wasn't easy. I think at that point, Mungret were going well. You know, they've suffered a big dip in form, and they'll be looking over their shoulder in the league. So a welcome break from that for them. But you also consider that Crew Park turned them over in the Munster Junior a couple of weeks ago, Adrian. So they'll be a little bit nervous, especially when they hear that Conor Ellis is back in the fold for Balla. It'll be a massive game for them. You quite rightly said they've lost a bit of ground in the league, and without being disrespectful, I think the league is probably gone for them now. At this stage, I don't see Pike Rovers and Fairview losing 3 or 4 games. I genuinely don't. So a focus on the FEI is something I'm sure that David Dunphy will be focused on. And if they have their full team out, Adrian, you'd expect them to come through it, but certainly won't be easy.